Morning students, this is Hindu Devi, Assistant Professor in Department of Mechanical Engineering. Uh, this is the lecture 14. In this session, we are discussing about Unit 2. Unit 2 Unit 2 is nothing but engine parts. In this engine parts, the subtopics are connecting rod, thrusting connecting rod, stress due to whipping action on connecting rod ends, crank and crankshafts, strength and proportions of overhang and the center hangs, crank pins, crankshafts, piston, forces acting on piston, construction design and properties of piston, cylinder, cylinder liners. Okay, this is the syllabus of Unit 2. In the first unit, we have discussed about bearings and types of bearings and how the bearings will be act on a different ball or roller bearings or journal bearings. And we have seen some problems on the ball bearings and also the journal bearings. That is the first one, unit one, and this is the unit two. In this session, in this unit two, we are discussing about the total engine parts and how it works and the design process of the engine parts we are discussing about in this unit 2. Okay. Mm. Mm. Introduction. First one, we should see some introduction. What is meant by engine parts and what are the engine parts so we are taking in this unit. See, the internal combustion, the IC engine, shortly called as a internal combustion engine, is one type of engines in which the thermal and chemical energies of combustion are released inside the engine cylinder. There is another type of heat engine called external combustion engine. For example, steam engine combustion takes place outside the engine cylinder, and thermal engineering is first transmitted to water outside the cylinder, and steam is produced, and then is a generalized steam is injected inside the cylinder for further operation. Okay, the IC engines are commonly operated by petrol, even fuels like petrol, diesel, and sometimes by gas. Depending upon the properties of these fuels, the construction of concerned engines may be slightly changed from one to another. But whatever be the type of engines, they have the following basic components, which are cylinder, piston, connecting rod, crankshaft, and flywheel. Apart from these main elements, they have some auxiliary elements like a pushrod, cams, valves, springs, and so on. Okay, these are the engine parts we are discussing in the IC engines. Okay, there are two types of engines will be there. One is external combustion engine, another one is internal combustion engine. In the external combustion engines is nothing but we are calling it as steam engines. Steam engines and the combustion takes place outside the cylinder is called it as external combustion engines. Okay, internal combustion engines. Internal combustion engines is nothing but in which the thermal and chemical energies of combustion takes place inside the cylinders is called it as internal combustion engines. Okay, the internal combustion engines are two types. One is a petrol engine and another one is a diesel engine or gas also. Okay, and these are the components of the basic components of the engine of any engine. Okay, what are the basic components? One is cylinder, piston, connecting rod, crankshaft, and a flywheel. These are the main components of the internal combustion engines. Okay, the internal combustion engines are employed in many places like in small capacity power plants, industries, and laboratory machines, and their outsiding applications are in the fuel of transportation like automobiles, aircrafts, rail engines, ships, and so on. Okay, the IC engines are employed in many places like in small capacity power plants, okay, industries in and laboratory machines, and their outsiding applications are the first transportations like automobiles, aircrafts, rail engines, and ships, and so on. Okay, the different types of classification of IC engines are First, the IC engines are classified as first one according to fuel used. According to the fuel used, either it is a petrol, diesel, or gas engine. Next, according to the method of ignition, a method of ignition, spark ignition or compression ignition, SI engine or CI engine. Okay, according to working cycle, or it is called it as a four-stroke engine or two-stroke engine. According to the cylinder arrangement, horizontal engine, vertical engine, inline, V engine, and radial engine. Okay, according to field of applications, automobile engine, motorcycle engine, aero engine, locomotive engine, and stationary engine. Okay, these are the types of classification of IC engines. Okay, first one according to the fuel used. According to the fuel used, petrol, diesel, or a gas engine. According to the method of ignition, it is a spark ignition or compression ignition engines. Next, according to working cycle, it is a four-stroke or two-stroke cycle engine. Okay, according to cylinder arrangement, that is horizontal, vertical, inline, radial, or the engine. Next, according to field of applications, automobile engine, motorcycle engine, and aero engine, locomotive, and stationary engine. See, these are the some terminologies used in the IC engines. Okay, the following terms or nomenclatures associated with an engine or explain the better understanding of the working principle of the IC engines. Working principle of the IC engines. First, if you see this is diagram, this is the main basic diagram of the engine parts. Okay, this is an inlet port. This is an exhaust port. Okay, first this is a TDC center and this is the BDC center. TDC is nothing but where the connecting rod upside motion is called as a top dead center. Connecting rod the motion is called as a bottom dead center. Okay, and this is throughout the cylinder. At the topmost position of the cylinder is called it as cylinder head. Okay, next the diameter of the cylinder is called it as a bore. Okay, the diameter of the cylinder is called it as bore. The length of the cylinder is called it as stroke. Okay, the length of the cylinder is called it as a stroke. Where from the TDC to top dead center, where the top dead center to top position of the cylinder, that position is called it as a clearance volume. Okay, that position is called it as a clearance volume. Okay, inlet port, exhaust port, clearance volume, stroke, top dead center, bottom dead center, cylinder, and cylinder head. Okay, cylinder head. Shall we discuss these terminologies in detail? First one, bore. The nominal inside diameter of the engine is called as bore. The diameter of the engine is called it as bore. Top dead center. The extreme position of the piston at the top of the cylinder of the vertical engine is called it as a top dead center. In case of horizontal engines, it is known as inner dead center. Okay, inner dead center. Next, bottom dead center. Bottom dead center is the extreme position of the piston at the bottom of the cylinder of the vertical engine is called it as bottom dead center. In case of horizontal engines, it is known as out dead center. Okay, stroke. The distance traveled by the piston from top dead center to bottom dead center is called as a stroke. In other words, the maximum distance traveled by the piston in the cylinder in one direction is known as stroke. It is equal to twice the radius of the crank. Next one, clearance volume. Clearance volume is we termed as VC. The volume contained in the cylinder above the top of the piston when the piston is at outlet center is called the clearance volume. Okay, swept volume. Swept volume is nothing but Vs. The volume swept by the piston during one stroke is called the swept volume. Okay, swept volume is the volume covered by the piston while moving from TDC to VDC. Swept volume is equal to total volume minus clearance volume. Swept volume is equal to total clearance minus total volume minus clearance volume. Okay, next compression ratio. Compression ratio is nothing but it is the ratio of the volume when the piston is at outlet center, volume center to the volume when the piston is at outlet center. Mathematically, compression ratio is equal to maximum cylinder volume by minimum cylinder volume. Maximum cylinder is the clearance volume. Minimum cylinder volume is called it as a minimum cylinder volume is called it as a swept volume plus clearance volume. The compression ratio varies from 5 is to 1 to 10 is to 1 for a petrol engine and 12 is to 1 to 20 is to 1 for diesel engine. Okay, next one, engine cylinder. Engine cylinder is nothing but at the time of compression and power stroke, more pressure is produced by the fuel gas inside the cylinder. In order to withstand this pressure, the cylinder and cylinder head and piston should be fabricated with a robust construction. The cylinder should have also the capacity to resist high temperature produced at the time of the power stroke. It should be able to transfer the unused heat efficiency so as to escape from reaching the melting temperatures of the cylinder material. During operation of the engine, the piston slides inside the cylinder millions of times, and thus the inside wall of the cylinder may be worn inside of the cylinder is worn out. Since the cylinder is made as the integral part of the engine, the removal of the cylinder for repairing the to rectify the wear or pull will be very tedious and not economically, and the cylinder is provided with the another thin cylinder. What is meant by engine cylinder? Engine cylinder is nothing but at the time of the compression stroke. Okay, there are four causes of the as already you have studied in the thermal engineering. There will be four strokes are there. One is exhaust suction stroke, combustion stroke, working stroke, and also exhaust stroke. Okay, these four stroke will be there. At the time of the compression and power stroke, power or working, we can call it as at the time of a compression or power stroke, the more pressure is produced by the fuel gas. So inside the cylinder, in order to withstand this pressure, the inside cylinder and the piston with the robust construction on the cylinder should have the capacity to resist very high temperature produced at the time of the power stroke. Okay. The outliner can easily replaced by new liner. Also by using a strong liner, the good quality and strong material equal to the tougher liner material need not to be used for the entire cylinder and engine, and this engine cost may be reduced. In this case of large sized engine, the cylinder with the water jacket for cooling pressure. Okay. In this engine cylinder only, the cylinder with water jacket for cooling pressure, and also the liners also will be used at this engine cylinders. Okay, in this compression and power stroke, the more pressure is to be produced throughout the fuel gas of the inside cylinder. In order to withstand and this high pressure, the cylinder should be very high, and also the piston should be fabricated throughout the pressure. Okay, ఇంజిన్ సిలిండర్ అంటే ఏం లేదమ్మా, పవర్ స్ట్రోక్ కంప్రెషన్ స్ట్రోక్ జరుగుతున్నప్పుడు ఆ మోర్ ప్రెషర్ వల్ల ఫ్యూయల్ గ్యాస్ అనేది ఏమవుతుంది అంటే ఇన్సైడ్ ది సిలిండర్ అంటే లోపల ఏమవుతుంది అంటే ద హై ప్రెషర్ అంటే విత్ ది హై ప్రెషర్ అండ్ ది పిస్టన్ షుడ్ ఫ్యాబ్రికేటెడ్ త్రూ అవుట్ ది ప్రాసెస్ అనేది జరుగుతుంది. ఓకే, ఆఫ్టర్ దట్ ప్రాసెస్ జరిగిన తర్వాత ఏంటి, త్రూ అవుట్ ది సిలిండర్ ఆఫ్ ది ఇంటిగ్రల్ పార్ట్ మీన్స్ ఇంటిగ్రల్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ది ఇంజిన్, ద రిమూవల్ ఆఫ్ ది సిలిండర్ ఫర్ రిపేరింగ్ ది very tedious and not economically, and hence the cylinder is another thin cylindrical positions. Okay, and this is the engine cylinder which will have the more pressure of the more pressure of the more pressure of the cylinders. Okay, the materials used is that the cylinder and liner should be made such a material which is strong enough to withstand the gas pressure and at the same time sufficiently has had hard enough to resist wear due to the piston movement. It should also be capable for resisting the thermal stresses due to the heat flow through the liner wall. In order to meet out the above requirements, the cylinder is usually made grey cast iron and liners are made up of nickel cast iron, nickel chrome cast iron, nickel chrome cast iron, steel, and so on. Okay, the cylinders and liners should also be different materials which will have high pressures at the same time to sufficient and hard enough to resist wear and due to the piston of the movement. Okay. And also the cylinder is usually made up of grey cast iron and the liners are made up of grey nickel cast iron or nickel chromium cast iron and nickel chrome steel. Steel can be used. Okay, these are the cylinder liners. Okay, the cylinder liners are provided with the cylinder liner so that in case of a wear they can be easily replaced. The cylinder liners are of two types. One is a dry liner, another one is wet liner. In this dry liner, the cylinder walls will be very thick, and also it has a heavily water jackets and also heavily replaced throughout the structure. In this the wet liner will also very rough enough, very wet, and also the spaces will be very low throughout the cylinder liners. A cylinder liner which does not have any direct contact with the engine cooling water is known as dry liner. A cylinder liner which does not have any direct contact with the engine cooling water is known as a dry liner. A dry liner which does not have any direct contact with the engine cooling water is known as a dry liner. A cylinder which have the outer surface in direct contact with the engine cooling water, it is known as a wet liner. Okay, the cylinder liners are made from good quality close grained cast iron, nickel cast iron, nickel chrome cast iron, chromium cast iron. In some cases, nickel chromium cast steel with a molybdenum may be used. The inner surface of the liner should be properly heat treated in order to obtain a hard surface to reduce wear. Okay, these are the cylinder liners which are used in the different types of the engine parts. Okay, what we have discussed up to now, we have discussed what is the terminologies used in the IC engines and what are the classifications used in the IC engines. Okay, after that, the different terminologies used in the IC engines like TDC, BDC, and stroke, bore, cylinder head, compression ratio, clearance volume, swept volume. These are called it as the terms used in the IC engines. Okay, IC engine. And next we have discussed about the cylinder liners. Cylinder liners and the types of the cylinder liners will be given. Cylinders liners are the given. Okay, this is the terminology which is used in the IC engines. Okay, in the last classes we have discussed about once revise that unit also. In the last class we have discussed about bearings. Okay, how many types of bearings? There are two types of bearings. Okay, one is sliding contact bearing, another one is rolling contact bearing. Okay, in the sliding contact bearing, another it has two bearings. One is a guide bearing, another one is sleeve bearing. Okay, and next rolling contact bearings also have two types. One is a ball bearing, another one is a roller bearings. Okay, in this sliding contact bearings only it is called it as a journal bearings. Journal bearing means inside the shaft we will rotate. It is called it as a journal bearings. Okay. Hmm. It is called it as a journal bearings. And next, ball bearings and roller bearings. So ball bearings and roller bearings is nothing but between the bearing and also the roller shaft. the balls are fixed, it is called it as a ball bearing, and where the rollers is fixed, it is called it as roller bearings. Okay. Next we have discussed about different types of film lubrication. Film lubrication, there are four types. One is hydrodynamic film lubrication, hydrostatic, boundary, and zero film lubrication. Hydrodynamic. Hydrodynamic means what? The hydrodynamic lubrication is nothing but hydrodynamic lubrication is nothing but mm, uh, the between the bearing and also the where a shaft will be rotated, the distance between them. I mean, it is not moving. It is in the stationary part. Automatically, the lubricant will be also in the stationary position. That position is called it as a hydrodynamic position. Okay, hydrostatic position. Hydrostatic position is called it as a where the position of the material where the position of the material will have very low, it is called it as a hydrostatic position. Okay. Hydrostatic position. Hydrostatic position. Boundary position means the distance between the lubricant layer and also the bearing is very low. It is called it as a boundary film lubrication. Next, zero film lubrication. Zero film lubrication means between the lubricant part and also the lubricant part and also the bearing, there is no space. It is a called it as a zero film lubrication. Okay. After zero film lubrication, we have discussed about the lubricants. Okay. Lubricants means there are different types of lubricants are there. Means lubricant means ఏంటి, ఎప్పుడైతే మనకి టైట్నెస్ అవుతుందో బిట్వీన్ ద బేరింగ్ అండ్ ఆల్సో ది షాఫ్ట్, టు లూజన్ ది ఇంజన్ or to loosen that part, we will use the some of the oils. Okay, like that solid type oil lubricant and liquid type lubricant and a semi-solid liquid type semi-solid lubricants. So these are the types of the lubricants we will be used. In that only there are different types. One is there are different types. First one, absolute viscosity. Absolute viscosity is nothing but we are called it as a Z. Z. How the absolute viscosity is applicable? Because so when the engine starts moving, the viscosity will be changed from the position of a different layers or different lubricants. It is called it as absolute viscosity. Absolute viscosity is termed as Z. Okay. Next, N is nothing but speed. Okay, speed. Speed also, how much of a engine we are taking, we will calculate that much of a speed. And next, cylinder line. That much of a speed, absolute viscosity, and also lubricating oil. Lubricating oil also different types of lubricating oils will be mentioned in this. Okay, next one, automatic. After that, lubricants, we will discuss about ball bearings and also roller bearings. Okay, ball bearings is nothing but between the bearing and also the shaft, between the fixed bearings is called as a ball bearings. Okay. Ball bearings. In that ball bearings also there are several types. Deep groove ball bearing, cylindrical ball bearing, needle type ball bearing, and double deep groove ball bearings. There are different types of ball bearings of the fixed. Okay, these are the cylinder liners which are to be used, and also the cylinders are provided with different cylinder liners. Okay, and roller bearings are also fixed between the bearing and also the shaft. The rollers are to be fixed, and rollers are to be fixed throughout the cylinder parts. Throughout the cylinder parts, those parts are called it as roller bearings. And these roller bearings we have discussed about different problems on general bearings and also different types of the different types of the journal bearings and also different types of the ball bearings we have discussed. Okay, in that only we have discussed the design process of journal bearing and also design process of a ball bearings. Okay, and we have discussed about a bearing characteristic number and bearing modulus. Bearing characteristic number is nothing but Zn by P into D by C into L by D. Okay, plus the three variables will be there. From the three variables only we will find out the coefficient of friction mu. Mu is equal to 33 by 10 to the power of 8 into Zn by P into 10 into T by C plus K. Okay, that is a called it as a bearing modulus. Okay, bearing modulus number. From that bearing modulus number only, we will calculate the design process of the journal bearing. How we will find out the design process of journal bearing? We will find out the pressure. Pressure P is equal to load by area. Area means L into D. Okay, L into D. After that, to find out the pressure, we will find out the L by D ratio from the data book. L by D ratio, and also from the L by D ratio we will find out the another we will find out the coefficient of friction we will find out another, we will find out the Zn by P by using the data book. Compare the values of the Zn by P Zn by P, and then we will find out the coefficient of friction. After the coefficient of friction, you will be taken as heat generated and heat dissipated in the bearing. If the heat generated and heat is dissipated, you will find out the artificial cooling required to the bearing. Okay, this is the simple procedures of the journal bearing, and also simple procedure of the ball bearing. Also, we have discussed. What is the procedure of a ball bearing? Ball bearing. What we had discussed? We had discussed of a from what with respect to the static load and the dynamic equivalent load, we will find out the ball bearings. Okay, static and dynamic equivalent load is nothing but C and C naught. Okay, from these values we will find out the bearing number, bearing numbers, and also from that bearing number only we will find out the ball bearing and the ball bearing and the availability of the bearing materials. Okay, that is the unit 1. In this unit 2, in different types of engine parts will be discussed. In throughout the engine parts we will be discussed several type of terminologies like this. Uh, Okay, like this, what we have discussed of the internal combustion engine and external combustion engines. Internal combustion engine is nothing but where the thermal and chemical energies of combustion are released inside the engine cylinder. Is called it as IC engines. And also there is another type of a heat engine like external combustion engines. External combustion engines is nothing but outside the cylinder where the thermal energy is fixed outside the cylinder is called it as a external combustion engine. External combustion engine. The IC engines are commonly operated by petrol, even fuels like a petrol, diesel, and sometimes of a gas. But whatever be the type of engines, they have the following basic components: cylinder, piston, connecting rod, crankshaft, and flywheel. Okay, and these are the classification of IC engines according to the fuel used: petrol, diesel, and gas. According to the method of ignition: spark ignition, compression ignition. According to working cycle: 4-stroke, 2-stroke. According to cylinder arrangement: horizontal engine, vertical engine, inline engine. According to field of application: automobile, motorcycle, and aerospace, locomotive, stationary engines are there in the classification of IC engines. Okay, this is the terminologies which are used in the IC engines. Top dead center, bottom dead center, clearance washing, stroke, exhaust, and cylinder head. These are the terminologies which are used in the IC engines. Okay, bore. The bore is nothing but the inside cylinder diameter of the engine cylinder is called as a bore. Top dead center, the extreme position of the piston. The position of the piston at the top of the cylinder of the vertical engine is called top cylinder, top dead center. Okay, in case of the horizontal engines, it is known as the inner dead center. Bottom the center. The extreme position of the piston at the bottom of the cylinder of the vertical engine is called a bottom dead center. In case of horizontal engines, it is known as the outer dead center. Okay, stroke. The distance that traveled by the piston from TDC to VDC is called a stroke. The other words, the maximum distance traveled by the piston in the cylinder in one direction is known as torque. Okay, it is equal to twice the radius of the crank. Clearance volume. The volume contained in the cylinder above the top of the piston when the piston is at opposite center is called as the clearance volume. Okay, swept volume. The volume swept by the piston during one stroke is called the swept volume or piston displacement. Swept volume is equal to total volume minus clearance volume. Compression ratio. Compression ratio is the ratio of the volume when the piston is at bottom is center to the volume when the piston is at opposite center is called as compression ratio. Mathematically, compression ratio is equal to maximum cylinder volume by volume divided by minimum cylinder volume. Maximum cylinder volume is nothing but a clearance volume, and also minimum cylinder volume is also set volume plus clearance volume. Okay, the compression ratio varies from 5 is to 1 and to 10 is to 1 for petrol engine, and from 12 is to 1 and 21 is to 1 is counted as per diesel engine. At the time of the compression of power stroke engine cylinder, at the time of compression and power stroke, more pressure is produced of the fuel gas inside the cylinder. In order to withstand this high pressure, the cylinder head and piston should be fabricated with a low-cost construction. It should be able to transfer the unused heat efficiency so as to escape from reaching the melting temperatures of the cylinder material. Okay, during operation of the engine, the piston slides inside the cylinder millions of times, and the inside wall of the cylinder may be worn out. Since the cylinder is made as the integral part of the engine, the removal of the cylinder for repairing to rectify the wear and reboring to it. Okay, this is engine cylinder. Okay. After that engine cylinder, the materials used in the engine cylinder. Cylinder liners are the two types. One is dry liner and wet liner. Okay, shall we we will discuss in the next class, students. Thank you.